let's begin our program. And to start off, we have the distinct pleasure of welcoming Purdue's president and former governor of the state of Indiana, Mitch Daniels.
Thank you, Dr. Spafford, Spaff, as he's universally known here, and perhaps to many of you. And the first thing I want to say is there won't be one of those drills, but if there were, I'd be both stunned and frankly disappointed if this particular crowd was orderly. It just would run counter to my image, you know, of the way you approach your work. Thank goodness you think in disorderly and unconventional and iconoclastic ways, or a lot of us would be a lot less safe than we are. I'm about to have, I gather, a handful of repeat victims are about to have one of those Groundhog Day experiences, because this is the second such conference this week, and I came over to say grace over both of them. And so for that handful who are being subjected to a second welcome, my apologies. But I feel like saying more or less the same thing. I think I made the point Monday, Spaff, that we play host at Purdue to between 600 and 700 conferences, academic and related conferences, a year. I don't inflict myself on more than a handful, but I was eager to come over to this one and also the parallel cyber warfare conference earlier in the week, just because of the obvious importance, first of all, to us all as citizens of this nation, citizens of the world, of the work you're doing. More and more impressed on even the amateurs among us all the time by everything we read. In my case, not just nonfiction, but fiction these days. That's how, when I read fiction, all I seem to want to read is something about your world. Also because of its close relationship to the history of our university. We believe we gave birth to the very first computer science department, close to a half century ago. CERIAS, your host at this conference, we believe was among the first and we believe one of the strongest interdisciplinary centers that tries to advance the arts in which you are so expert. So, and a big part of our future too. Here at Purdue, where we already graduate more technology, confer more technology degrees than any other university in absolute terms, we are embarked on a major expansion of our already large engineering college and about a 1/3 expansion of our computer science department. So we are attempting to contribute, as I know people in this room so richly contribute, not only to the science and the technology of your ever more important discipline, but we hope also to the security of our country and of the enterprises and individuals who comprise it. So really just wanted to come and say a special word of thanks for your work individually, for coming together on this occasion, for allowing Purdue to be your host. We are utterly committed here to providing support and we hope future resources, intellectual and human, for the ever more proficient practices that will keep us all safe and enable us to enjoy the miraculous benefits of modern information technology without suffering consequences that no one intended at their invention. So thank you so very much for being here. Have a great, great conference. Special thanks to our special thanks, by the way, to Amy Hess and those others who are here who serve us either in military or law enforcement capacities. We're enormously grateful for your public service and your leadership on this subject particularly. Thanks a lot.
Traditionally, at this event, we have several speakers. We have 2 designated keynotes. We generally have one person from industry with a leadership position to provide a perspective of what's going on, and one person from government in a position of leadership to also provide a view of what's happening there. And for our speaker from government, we have someone who is an Indiana native. And you might sort of wonder at a point, how does someone who grew up in little Jeffersonville, Indiana, end up being one of the highest ranking officials at the FBI? Well, I can tell you part of the answer is getting a degree from Purdue. But then there's also a lot of hard work along the way. So our speaker, as I said, grew up in Jeffersonville and knew from an early age that she wanted to either be an FBI agent or an astronaut. And that path, it's an interesting choice, and I'm not going to go into that further. You could perhaps ask her later. But pursuing that choice, she came to Purdue and did a degree in astro-aero here at Purdue. After graduation, she discovered that one needed 20/20 vision to be an astronaut. And I don't think LASIK was quite developed well enough at that point yet. And so the FBI route was the one that she took. I have, as some elements of bio, that at the FBI, she started off as people do there as a special agent involved in investigations of fraud, of narcotics trafficking, violent crime, and did all of that at Kansas City as a first assignment. Then went to Louisville, where she worked domestic terrorism, and was the principal firearms instructor. So that also says that her vision is good enough. She then went to FBI headquarters, where she was part of the inspection team and became the team leader in the inspections division, which goes out and looks at the field offices to make sure that they're doing the kinds of things that they should. Then went to Arizona and was involved with, she was the assistant special agent in charge of the Phoenix division. And while there, she made a sort of a lateral transition from Arizona to Afghanistan, where she was part of the team involved in counterterrorism operations in Afghanistan. And yes, the FBI actually does have offices and operations around the world to help law enforcement in a number of other places around the world. She returned to the U.S., was made the special agent in charge of the Memphis office after another tour at headquarters. And then, I don't think you even completed a year at Memphis, and was named as the executive assistant in charge of science and technology for the FBI, which is, as I said, one of the highest rankings. She said there's only one person between her and the director. So that's a fairly senior position, and one that finally puts to use some of the things she learned here at Purdue. Please join me in welcoming Amy Hess.
Appreciate it. Thank you, and good morning. Again, appreciate the invitation to be here and address all of you today. Certainly thanks to Dr. Spafford and the staff and everybody who went behind the scenes to put this event together for you. I am thrilled to be here. Certainly I am excited to be back on campus, to be here for what I hope will be certainly a productive dialogue on the challenges faced by government, by industry, and by academia as we grapple with this thing called cybersecurity. So it's been over, I think, about 15 years, unfortunately, since I last visited my alma mater. And I'm just amazed by all that's changed. Certainly I didn't recognize half of it when I was driving in last night. I have a lot of fond memories of course, the Engineering Mall, Old Grissom Hall. I'm looking forward to seeing Neil Armstrong Hall later today. I remember walking to class in sub-zero temperatures, and last night it was very consistent with what I remember. Getting that everything covered up on your face except for the little piece between your eyes, and having a headache by the time you got to your 7:30. I remember eating at Garcia's Pizza, which is now Hot Box, I guess, and Toogie's Cookies and all the stuff over at Chauncey Mall that made me spend endless hours at the co-rec trying to burn it all off. And of course, attending games at Ross-Ade Stadium and Mackey Arena, and of course, my roommates and my friends at Windsor Hall. So it all came back to me as I was driving in last night. I certainly wish I could stay for, I understand you have Springfest coming up, the reunion of Purdue's NASA astronaut alumni on April 12th. I would love to see that. I of course, often tell that story that, of course, the whole reason for getting a degree in aeroastro was because I thought I could parlay that into either of those two things, astronaut, FBI agent. Of course, at the time, that whole 20/20 vision thing kind of kicked in, and I thought, you know, that FBI agent thing seems pretty cool, so I'll try that one instead. I've certainly, of course, enjoyed having the opportunity to work a variety of programs in the FBI, as Spaff said, from violent crimes and street gangs, drug trafficking, international drug trafficking organizations, domestic terrorism. And with each successive level of management, I've had the opportunity to oversee both domestic and international operations, which has just been an enlightening experience for me as well. But I returned to my engineering roots finally when I was named the Assistant Director of the FBI's Operational Technology Division. The Operational Technology Division basically enhances and enables the FBI's investigative operations worldwide. Not enterprise IT, but more of the operational technologies needed for our agents, our investigators, to do their job. And more recently, as the Executive Assistant Director over the Science and Technology branch, I was named to that position in January, and now that entails not only my former division, Operational Technology Division, but also the FBI Laboratory, think CSI, and as well as the Criminal Justice Information Services Division, which is in Clarksburg, West Virginia, and handles a lot of our interface with the state and local law enforcement communities throughout the country. Each of these divisions, of course, encompass a variety of programs and a variety of specialists, highly trained cyber specialists, scientists, and engineers that I am proud to have the privilege to represent, because everything they do, I've found, impacts in some way the FBI's investigations. The FBI's operations are supported by something that those individuals do on a daily basis, both in the law enforcement mission as well as the national security mission as well. Now, at the recent RSA conference, our new director, new as of last fall, FBI Director James Comey, spoke to an audience, a very large audience, out on the West Coast of private sector cyber experts, similar, of course, to what we find here today. At that conference, he opened his remarks by expressing a desire to do a better job of listening to our law enforcement partners, our intelligence counterparts, and of course the private industry and academia, to get a handle on each of our perspectives and what we need from each other. He referred to active listening as not Washington listening, which is where you just nod your head and eventually say what you're going to say before the person across from you began talking, but rather actually listening to what they're saying and listening to their concerns. As I stand among you today, of course, it goes without saying that academia plays a key role in these cyber discussions as well. And I share his desire for strong communication. Now, clearly, I don't need to explain the cyber threat to you. You're the experts. You know we face cyber threats from state-sponsored hackers, from hackers for hire, organized cyber syndicates, and, of course, terrorists. They seek our state secrets, our trade secrets, our technology, and our ideas. They may seek to strike our critical infrastructure and our economy. The threat is so dire that cybersecurity has topped the list of global threats identified by the Director of National Intelligence for the second consecutive year, surpassing both terrorism and espionage, and even the threat now posed by weapons of mass destruction. Given the scope of the cyber threat, agencies across the federal government, including the Department of Homeland Security, Department of Justice, and the Department of Defense, are making cybersecurity a top priority. Within the FBI, we're trying to target those highest level intrusions, the biggest and most dangerous botnets, state-sponsored hackers, and global cyber syndicates. We want to predict and prevent attacks rather than reacting after the fact, much as we approach terrorism over the past 2 decades. At the same time, we're also combating the proliferation of sophisticated technologies and the commission of traditional crimes. Terrorists and criminals both are exploiting the very technologies which enhance our daily lives to enable and to mask their nefarious activities. So FBI agents, analysts, and computer scientists are now combining their technical capabilities, their strengths, and their traditional investigative techniques, such as human sources and wiretaps, surveillance and forensics. And they're all coming together to fight cybercrime. We're working side by side with our federal, our state, and our local partners on cyber task forces in each of our 56 field offices. And we're training our state and local counterparts to triage local cyber matters so that we can focus on national security issues. We're also working closely with our federal partners through the National Cyber Investigative Joint Task Force, or the NCIJTF. Now, every key federal player is there, right there in one space: DHS, CIA, NSA, Secret Service, and many others, sharing cyber intelligence and working cases together. No turf battles, just solid teamwork and collaboration in a location just outside of Washington, D.C. As mentioned before, we're doing a lot of work overseas, internationally. Our legal attaché offices overseas coordinate cyber investigations and address jurisdictional hurdles and differences in the law from one country to another. As you know, what is a criminal violation in the law in one country with regard to malware or intrusions may not be illegal in another country, and that presents difficulties for our operators overseas. We have special agents embedded with police departments in cyber hotspots, including Estonia, Romania, the Ukraine, and the Netherlands, where they're working to identify emerging trends and key players. But this isn't enough. We need to do more. We can't do what we need to do with our private sector partners or without constructive dialogue with academia, with you, the people here in this room. Private industry and academia, of course, are primary victims, as you know, of the evolving cyber threat. But you're also key to defeating it. And we need that. You have the information on your servers and in your networks. You have the expertise and the knowledge we need to stop the attacks. And we want to actively listen to your concerns. We understand the reluctance to report intrusions, either because of the worry that the government is going to come in and start rummaging around private networks, or because of the fear that someone's reputation is going to take a hit. You may be worried about the loss of confidentiality and liability issues. Private industry, and especially in the research arena, where there's strong emphasis on information sharing, this is obviously a real concern. The problem is that we, as the government, are not always real clear on what information we need from private industry or from academia. And there's a concern it'll take too long to provide it when we do tell you what we want. There's no unified threat reporting system, and there's still some confusion about the lanes in the road. Who's responsible for what in the federal government when it comes to cybercrime? And how do you know who to turn to? And how best to navigate that federal bureaucracy? In addition, it often seems that the information flow is just one way, to the government. Yes, we have information that we cannot always share for a variety of reasons, but we are doing our best to change that. We need to share as much information as we can, as quickly as possible, and in the most usable format so that you can take action. We need to continue to reduce our time needed to reduce our victim notification backlog so that you can take steps to minimize any breach. And we need to clarify what we're looking for when you discover that you've been attacked. When industry has been attacked, we need to know how that happened. Now, we understand that industry needs to zealously guard proprietary information and data. We want to be surgical and precise in what we're looking for and what we'll do in order to get that information. We need to do to help them to protect those privacy rights and maintain that competitive advantage. We want to work with private industry to figure out what happened and who is responsible, get that attribution so that we can better defend the networks and the data, identify emerging trends, and protect the public. But we have to work together in order to see the whole picture. For example, we can patrol the streets and say, yep, streets look safe, but if there are big walls on either side and I can't see through those walls, I don't know what's going on the other side of those walls. I don't know what's really happening. And we need your help to understand that, to understand what's happening on the other side of those walls, so that we can do our job, the job that the American people have entrusted us to do, which is to protect you and the citizens of the U.S. We must provide incentives and means and the assurances to share information quickly and accurately as a matter of course. And effective partnerships are one way to do this. Now, the FBI has several great partnerships with the private sector already in place, such as the Domestic Security Alliance Council, which brings together security professionals from all across industry, InfraGard, which you may be familiar with, and the National Cyber Forensics and Training Alliance, or NCFTA. As I said, many of you may be familiar with these groups, and many of you contribute to their work already. But these partnerships are key. They're important. We also need to cultivate one-on-one relationships. Our special agents in charge and their deputies in every field office should be on a first-name basis with key industry and academic partners in their communities. When I was in Memphis, I certainly did the same, reaching out to my academic and my industry partners so that we had that one-on-one relationship, so that we didn't have to introduce ourselves to each other when the crisis happened. That's important. And if that isn't happening, we need to fix that. I know that certainly here in the Indianapolis field office, under the leadership of the SAC, Bob Jones, that is happening. And certainly they are on a first-name basis. But as the saying goes, the time to repair the roof is when the sun's shining. And it's cloudy out there right now at best. We also need to share information in real time, machine to machine. To date, we've been fighting DDoS attacks at human speed, sending malware indicators, host names, and IP addresses to those in the private sector. But we understand that sending a whole laundry list of IP addresses without any context isn't really that useful. And it puts companies at risk of blocking legitimate web traffic. That's why we've created the FBI Liaison Alert System, or FLASH. It's intended to send specific data used in an attack, and that data that we believe will be used again. We're providing the ISPs with the information they need to shut down compromised attack nodes. And whenever possible, we have warned potential victims of pending network attacks so they can shore up their defenses. But human speed just doesn't cut it. The cyber threat is too pervasive, it's too persistent, and it's too fluid. Imagine a day where intelligence from combined sources, the government, antivirus companies, the providers, the financial services sector, and communications companies is shared instantaneously, machine to machine, pursuant to law and with strong privacy protections in place. What if we were able to stop much of the malware as it transited the networks, not after it happened? It's no longer good enough to identify malware as it attacks your system. We need to get in front of it. We must be able to break down each intrusion into distinct phases. We need to create a blueprint, because even our most sophisticated adversaries will try to repeat successful attacks. We need to examine their patterns and their behaviors and determine how they operate and how best to stop them. We must build an intelligence-driven predictive capability, much like we did with counterterrorism. To do that, though, we need an automated intrusion system and a standard language and a data format through which we all communicate in real time. And of course, we need to do all of this while being mindful of the need to protect privacy and promote innovation. But how do we get there? In the FBI's Operational Technology Division, where I came from, we've created a malware repository and analysis tool known as the Binary Analysis Characterization and Storage System, or BACS. It provides near real-time investigative information. It's intended to help us link malware in different jurisdictions and paint a picture of cyber threats worldwide. It tells us what the malware is, how it works, and how many times we've seen it before, where we've seen it before, and who actually put it there. It connects those dots across investigations. And later this year, we'll introduce an unclassified version of BACS, known as Malware Investigator, for use by all of our private sector partners and outreach partners as well. That way, if an institution has been hacked, they can send the malware to us in most cases, receive a report within hours on how it works, what it might be targeting, and whether others have suffered a similar attack. Our goal is to make BACS the nation's repository for malware and viruses in the same way that the FBI maintains fingerprints, DNA, and criminal arrest records, so that we can provide that information back to our partners in real time. We also want to provide a real-time electronic means for reporting intrusions. Through the iGuardian initiative, law enforcement and the private sector can quickly and easily pass information back and forth, both classified and unclassified data. We can build on our collective knowledge and fight these attacks head-on. Now, this is the model we're striving for, using intelligence gathered from our own authorities and our own partners to stop a threat before it becomes a problem. This is the only true incentive we need to prevent as many attacks as possible. Now, I want to touch on privacy issues for just a moment. Some have suggested there is an inherent conflict between protecting national security and preserving privacy and civil liberties. But I think the ideas of balance and trade-offs are really the wrong framework, because they make it seem like a zero-sum game, like it's either or. At our best, we're looking for security measures that enhance liberty. When a city posts police officers at a dangerous park so children and the elderly can actually use that park, doesn't security promote liberty? The men and women of the FBI are sworn to protect both national security and civil liberties. It's in our oath. It's not a question of conflict. We have to care deeply about both in every investigation and in every program. The fact of the matter is that the United States faces real threats from criminals, from terrorists, from spies, and malicious cyber actors. That's reality. To stop those threats, the government needs timely and accurate intelligence to identify threat actors and to figure out what they're doing, to figure out what they're planning. That means we need to conduct electronic surveillance and collect data about electronic communications. Those are proven methods for preventing attacks from occurring and for assigning attribution to the people who did it. Now, the real question is, how do we do that in a way that allows us to prevent bad things from happening to our own people and our own allies, but at the same time protect privacy and civil liberties, and yet still promote innovation? Now, I'm not an alarmist, but I'm in a serious business. So I want to ensure that when we discuss altering tools that we use to collect information on an individual who we believe is engaged in or connected to a criminal, terrorist, or other unlawful activity, that we understand the benefits and the trade-offs. The same is true when we allow the effectiveness of those tools to erode gradually over time, because law doesn't keep up with technology at a fast enough pace. The law either fails to be updated, or when our tools become less effective, through unauthorized disclosures of our capabilities. That impedes our ability to do our job. Now, intelligent people can and do disagree. That's the beauty of American life. But we need to make sure that everyone understands the risks associated with the work we do and the choices we make as a country. The same considerations exist with regard to cybersecurity. Before he left us last year, Director Mueller commented that he believed cyber issues would come to dominate the FBI as counterterrorism had dominated his time as director. And I believe he was right. We must be agile and predictive on every front, just as we were with counterterrorism. And we must use every tool and authority at our disposal to stop these malicious activities from occurring. Now, of course, the cyber threat is different from the terrorist threat because we have not yet experienced a watershed event like the attacks of September 11th. But we all recognize that we're at risk and that we must act quickly. We must plan ahead, much is at stake. Look, these are tough issues. I know there are legitimate questions and important things to discuss. I have dedicated certainly my career to upholding the rule of law, and I'm committed to making sure that people understand how the government is using its legal authorities. But finding the space and the time in American life to understand these issues is very hard. It gets oversimplified a lot. It gets oversimplified a lot in the media, in discussions, and my job is to try to explain that better. My hope is we can resolve these issues through open and honest communication, and that's my goal. It's our director's goal for the FBI in our interaction with our state, local, and international counterparts, and with all of you. We simply must work together and play to our strengths. When it comes to cybersecurity, you have the technical expertise, the infrastructure, the innovation. You're often the first to see what's coming over the horizon. We have the law enforcement and the national security and the intelligence capabilities and the global presence. We're each playing to our strengths, but even that really isn't enough. We've got to play as a team. It won't be easy, and we won't always see eye to eye. But as the basketball coach Phil Jackson said, I tried to look up Gene Katie, but I couldn't find a good quote to apply here. The strength of the team is each individual member, and the strength of each member is the team. We need to figure out how to combine our strengths, and that'll take time and a lot of active listening. But the FBI is in this for the long haul. We really are and want to be on your side, but we'll do everything we can to protect your data, your innovation, your intellectual property, not to mention your friends and family, and keep them safe and secure. In the FBI, in the Operational Technology Division, I committed over 3 years to making sure that happened. Certainly that division is responsible for a number of electronic surveillance capabilities, and trying to keep up with the changing technology while at the same time applying the rule of law is very challenging. Now, of course, in my new position as governing all of the science and technology pieces of the FBI outside of enterprise IT is further challenged by our ability to share information with state and local partners and making sure that information is in real time. And we're getting in real time and pushing it back in real time. Some of the things that certainly that I look forward to working with you and all of our colleagues on is trying to improve, because we know that we have a lot of work to do in this area, a lot of work to do on behalf of the government to make sure, first of all, that we explain our authorities, that we explain why we need the information that we need, but then also to assure that those civil liberties are protected. I look forward to working with you down the road. I'm certainly proud to be an alumnus of this great university and all that it represents. And certainly I thank you for having me here today. I know that we're going to have a lot of good discussion here shortly in the fireside chat, and I look forward to that as well. But currently, I'm certainly open to any questions that you might have. Okay.
How much harder has your job?
We're going to have an audience mic. We're going to move it right here. So if you could all come to the microphone, that would be great, because we're recording the sound that way.
This may be an obvious question, but how much harder has your job become with the NSA stories and the WikiLeaks and all of those things that have been brought to the forefront of the media?
No, good question. So, so one of the things, first of all, it has made our job more difficult. I think that anytime there are disclosures, even with another agency, that it impacts all agencies who may use even a fraction of the same type of framework. If it's not book collection, perhaps, it's specific types of technology. Now, granted, when we approach our problems, we have those core authorizations, those court orders in order to do that. But the underpinning technology may be the same. And when that's disclosed, of course, then it presents a risk that, first of all, the investment that we put into that technology, secondly, that our adversaries, of course, can take steps to preclude that from happening. And, of course, whatever other repercussions that might have, we see those impacts to say that now perhaps our targets, our adversaries, may be avoiding the use of that technology because now it has been disclosed. And those are certainly real concerns for us and have been.
Aside from classification issues, what other issues limit your ability to share information with the commercial industry?
So first of all, legal privacy issues. A big part of that is privacy impact assessments, which we have to do for every piece of technology and every data repository that we might have. So whenever we do collections, we obviously have, I was telling some folks last night that it never occurred to me when I came back, finally, like I said, circling back around to my roots in engineering, as to how linked up we are with our attorneys. It's that I actually have attorneys in every section throughout my branch. And the reason is because we have to do those privacy impact statements. We have to determine how we are using this information that's protected under the Privacy Act and how we basically are able to share that information back. Another piece of it, the concern when it comes to sharing information, is whether or not the victim wants us to share that information, how much of that information they want to be shared, how much do they want other people to know that a particular event happened, and report that information. And so that's another concern as well that we have to work through. And of course, in addition to that, of course, the impacts that sharing that information may have on a broader scale. Much as the disclosures we were just talking about, if we share too much information about how that happened, with the opportunity or the likelihood that that information may go beyond its intended recipient, then we have to be cognizant of that as well. And of course, the classification issues when it comes to national security information, we have to protect that and do that as well. Good question.
Hi, Kevin Roundy from Symantec. I just wanted to ask you, to elaborate a little more on the incentives that you see for companies that might have been breached to be sharing this data for you in the long and short term.
Yeah, no, that's great. One of the things that we're really excited about with this malware repository I was referring to earlier is being able to share that information back. What we're seeing, even with our own investigators in our own system, as we currently have it on our system, is that we're making connections across multiple field offices. We have 56 field offices out there, and of course a number of our legal attaché offices. And when we get that information from them, we're already seeing those connections because, as you know, obviously, the cyber threat is different from the threats that we've addressed in the past, where you actually knew the exact location of your victim or your perpetrator. And as a result, we had a very geographically oriented model that we've been working from for over 100 years. But in the cyber world, that's different. And so where we saw a certain threat in one field office, another field office may not have known about that until they put this into this malware repository that we're referring to as BACS. And now that we've started to see those connections, because we're seeing how it works, where it's been seen before, how it was used, and see those patterns, what we're hoping to do is expand that model even further so that we can get the information from private industry, from obviously our other federal, state, and local counterparts, so that we can further expand that database. But, of course, the key to that is making sure it's useful for those people, for the recipients, the people who are contributing that information. Because if you just put it in there and you don't get anything back, it's not useful to you. I wouldn't share it if I wasn't getting anything back either. So what we got to do is make it useful to them as well, so that you're getting the same type of information back, but recognizing that those contributors may not want all that information shared for a variety of reasons. And those are the legal and policy issues that we have to work through in order to ensure that we put the right information in there. It's still useful to whoever the recipient or the requester is, and also to validate that request, but basically to ensure that we facilitate that type of information sharing in as near real time as possible. And that's going to be key for the success of the program.
First of all, thank you for being here. And secondly, can you talk to what you are doing to help agents in the field stay abreast of all the new technologies and threats?
Yes, absolutely. Are these mine? Yeah. Oh, okay. I didn't want to take somebody else's water.
As much as you want.
Thanks. No, thank you. That's exciting. An exciting part of what I do is in the branch that I currently represent, we are very keen to elevate the capabilities across the FBI. And what's interesting is we started a program a couple of years ago known as the High Technology Environment Training, I think, High Tech. And we rolled it out, and actually our training division rolled it out. And what was interesting to us is that in the FBI you have about 35,000 employees, and about 15,000 of those, maybe a little less, are agents. And then on top of the 35,000, you have a number of task force officers on a variety of task forces. And when you roll out a one-size-fits-all type of training, what you find is a lot of comments come back and say, that was the hardest test I ever took. And then somebody else will write in and say, I can't believe you put that test out there. I could have done that when I was 6. and so as a result, what we found is you have to do a lot of more targeted training in order to play to the skill sets of the vast variety of personnel that we have out there and their capabilities and their backgrounds and experiences. We in the FBI have so many different people from so many different walks of life. We have, obviously, we have graduates of this university in cyber fields who there's no way that a basic 101 course is going to do them any good. We have to obviously find the latest and greatest courses, the training, give them the capabilities, the equipment, the things that we need in order to keep them on the cutting edge. On the other hand, you have investigators who might have come from a state or local law enforcement agency who may have come from criminal justice backgrounds. They are the investigators. They are the key to making investigations, but they may not have much of a technical background. And the key for us is, as we encounter this proliferation of technology in our investigations, how do we ensure that those people, who I call my customers, the investigator is my customer, the agent is my customer in my branch, how do I make sure that they have the capabilities that they need? And part of that is to roll out things to get them to work smarter. I use examples where when I was an agent in Kansas City working drug cases, we would go into a search warrant, and at that time, of course, you collect all the digital media. At that time was either, of course, the standalone desktop. You saw very few thumb drives even. Then you might have seen a CD, but mostly it was floppy disks, right? So at any rate, I know I just dated myself. So anyway, you come back and you dump it all on the forensic examiner. And that was okay at the time because there really wasn't that many cases where you actually had digital evidence. But over the past 15 years, I have charts and graphs that I share on a frequent basis. It shows the proliferation, the exponential increase in the amount of digital evidence we're seizing in all investigations, not just cyber investigations, but drug investigations, white-collar investigations, violent crimes, bank robberies. I mean, these are cases that didn't used to have that type of evidence. And the problem is that we haven't really increased the number of forensic examiners. So how do we get around that problem? We get our folks to work smarter. We look at our policies. We determine if our policies may be too restrictive. One of the things we've done in the past 2 years is open up that training, the basic forensic training, to the average investigator so that they know how to handle digital evidence. They can do basic things like imaging and search, find, extract, if we give them just a little bit of training to know how to do that. Then they can become fact witnesses in court. You don't need that high-level forensic examiner to do the complex examination to do that. 90% of their cases may simply be an imaging search, find, extract type of capability. The other thing is to build, I call them arcade games. They look like arcade games, but kiosks, digital media kiosks, loose media kiosks, so that when the investigator comes back from that search warrant, I can plug it in and see what's on there without altering the evidence in any way. Just being able to see what's on there will allow me to then get that additional search warrant, to get that arrest warrant that I may need in order to make my case. Those are things that used to take months because we only had a select number of forensic examiners to be able to do that work. So it's that type of thing where we're trying to train the investigators to learn how to use these tools, to acquire additional skills, and to really understand what it means when they encounter digital evidence and how to handle it. But on top of that, electronic surveillance capabilities to try to teach them when it's appropriate and when it's not. One of the things that I'm currently challenged with, you obviously hit on a key question because I'm going on about it, is that we have a real need out there for video collection. The problem is it's driven it's driven not by the government's needs, it's driven by the juries. Juries want to see video for everything, and they don't want to see grainy one frame per second video. They want to see high def streaming video, and it doesn't matter if it was the low-level bankruptcy fraud case, mortgage fraud case, or if it was a terrorism case. They want to see high def streaming video. Problem is, first of all, it's expensive. Secondly, is that means that our capabilities obviously are stretched. The equipment, the training, the type of people, the technically trained agents that we have in every field office need to know how to keep up with that type of thing. And on top of that, we also have to educate not only our investigators, but the prosecutors as well, so that they understand what they will get or what they won't get as a result of the capabilities that we have out there. And also, a big part of our job is managing expectations. With the agent, with the investigator, task force officer, or prosecutor, we may have to say, do you really need that high-def streaming video if all you want to know is whether or not Joe Blow walked out of that building? If that's all you care about, do you really need that high-def streaming video? And that's a managing expectations education that we need to have as well. Not to preclude that. Certainly, my business is to say yes and to get the investigator, the customer, what they need, what they want. But at the same time, to try to manage those expectations as well, because it sounds really simple when we seize evidence or when we obtain evidence to be able to give the smartphone to my encryption specialist and say, here, figure out what's on this. And they come back to me and they say, I can't. I don't know how to get into this phone. We don't have the technology to do that. We don't have the technology to do that. We have the court order that says I seize this phone. The investigator doesn't understand. What do you mean you don't have the technology to do that? What do you mean you can't get into that smartphone? What do you mean that you can't get into that computer because it's encrypted? And as a result, we have to manage those expectations. All right, I know I went on about that. Key point. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Given the financially challenged environment that you're operating in, how are you setting your priorities?
Yeah, that's a big part of my job. So what we had this thing last year. It was called sequestration. That was a good exercise for us all. This is an interesting dynamic in human nature, in businesses, bureaucracies, I should say. So we had a lot of discussions about but above all, we have to protect our operations. We have to protect our agents. We have to protect our investigators. And that, I agree completely, is that we got to protect those. So basically, we took personnel cuts and non-personnel cuts across the board. It was about 25% cut across most programs. But the problem was that the operational divisions, I call them operational divisions, the ones that are responsible for the investigators, the agents out there, took very minor cuts compared to the shared services divisions, the supporting divisions like mine. And I don't say that to do a self-pity moment. The problem is that if we have agents out there and we put more agents out there without the supporting structure, without the technology, without the equipment and the things that they need, the supporting people that they need in order to make them successful in their investigations, they won't be successful in their investigations. And that's a difficult concept to grasp, because immediately comes to we'll protect the agents. You also have to manage that balance and to prioritize correctly, to be able to say that you also need to have this, and this. What happens if I have all these agents out there, but I have no one maintaining my radio program? We have the world's largest land mobile radio program in all of law enforcement. And I have a lot of electronics technicians who maintain that program. The problem is, if they're not there, the agents' radios are useless. So we have to prioritize that correctly. And so one of the biggest pieces and key elements that we've tried to work on since sequestration, and now that we've seen somewhat of a reversal of that, trying to get that money back in. As we start to layer the money back, are we investing wisely? And to do that, one of the initiatives we're working on currently is something we call strategic alignment of base resources. And what that means is that I want my divisions to come up with a list, a menu, if you will. Here's all the things we do. And then I can take that list to the operational division, whether it's the cyber division, whether it's the counterterrorism division, our counterintelligence division, or our criminal investigative division, which handles all of our criminal investigative matters. And I can give them that menu, and they can tell me what's important. Because in the past, what we've done is, a lot of times, they don't understand what we do. They see a list of a menu of 864 items, and they say, I don't know, you tell me. You tell me what's important. We've got to do a better job of explaining it to them so that they understand it, but then also get them to help us by prioritizing. And then having somebody pull all that together so that I, at the end of the day, walk away with my menu of items prioritized by the operational divisions, by my customers, and say, okay, that's great. These are all the things you need. These are all the things you want. The 20%, though, I call that the 80% piece. The 20% piece is we as technologists, as the engineers, as the forward thinkers, also have to preserve the piece that they're not thinking of. Because the one thing they're not going to say is, this is what I need tomorrow. They're going to say what I need today. They're going to say, this is what I need today to make my case successful, to make my investigation successful. They're not going to say, this is what I need in 2 years or 5 years. That's why I got all these really smart people down at Quantico and out in West Virginia to be able to think ahead and to think over the horizon. This is where technology is going. This is why we need these partnerships so that we can see collectively where are we going as a society and what is the bad guy of tomorrow going to be using that we need to start building to today. Because if we don't do that, then when that investigator gets that court order next year or the year after, and we can't serve it because we can't get that information, then obviously we're behind the power curve and we haven't done our job. So in order to prioritize, we need that collective interaction with all those operational divisions, but also those partnerships so that we can prioritize the forward look as well. And it's a key part of making these shared services divisions like mine successful.
As an illustration, just for me at least, to better understand the process, could you give us an example of a cyber investigation, an incident that happened, and how that process unfolded and how the organization works?
So, yeah, sure. Basically, when first notified, whether we find out about the attack or ourselves and notify the victim, or the victim notifies us, the key piece that certainly our cyber division, our cyber operational division, wants to do is to get to that attribution. And the problem is, what we found is that getting to that attribution used to involve multiple offices. Because one office may encounter it, they may see it transit the network, you may have multiple hops. So wherever that intrusion was happening, if a field office thought that they had a hop, then they would open a case. And that was part of the confusion that came in as to, well, who really owns this? Where did it really start? We don't know who started it, where it started, then who really has the lead role in that investigation. And so one of the things that we've done is to try to manage that back at headquarters because it's a very different model from what we're used to in the past. And so once we realized that that's the best way to go about doing this, and also that's not just for FBI, that's also for all the other agencies that may not be aware of that intrusion as well, to make sure they're all talking in the same room so that we can say, okay, who has the lead here? Let's talk that out in basically a war room type of structure. And to say, okay, now let's see what we can do about it. Now, as far as the legal and policy confines of figuring out, not only to certainly notify the victim, to shore up, the defenses, so that we can prevent further damage from occurring, but also how do we reach into that network? Now you've brought up all kinds of legal and policy concerns as to how far do you go. If the victim may not want you in their network, or they say, yeah, I'm okay with you getting in my network, but what happens after that? What happens beyond that? Now you've obviously encountered a whole variety of policy and legal hurdles and concerns, and that's where I was talking about. You have to have those attorneys come in, to make sure that we're not only not violating domestic law, but international law as well. And that's where we need those partnerships overseas too, because what may be illegal in this country, maybe from where it originated, that's not a problem. And as a result of that, we have to have those types of agreements in place as well, so that we get that mutual assistance from those countries. But it's a very difficult process to walk through all of those legal and policy hurdles in real time in order to get to that attribution. But regardless, that's exactly what our cyber division is set up to try to do and to walk through those exact problems. My division's responsibilities is to support them from a technology perspective. So in other words, to make sure that they have the techniques and the tools in order to get that attribution, so that they know what the malware does, so that we have the network set up so that when one office encounters an incident and they're talking to multiple other offices, they can communicate in real time. They can actually see that malware and get in there and play with it on an operational wide area network that will enable that type of virtual case brainstorming sessions that we need to have, so that our technologists, our computer scientists, our cyber investigators can all talk collectively virtually and looking at the same type of data. So that's where my divisions come in to that picture.
What kind of progress are we making on types of attacks to our infrastructure, like to the electrical or financial, water, similar to, but maybe not exactly like the Stuxnet virus?
I'm probably not the best person to talk about, obviously, the cyber operations piece, but certainly I know that through the sector communications that we're doing, trying to do a better job in, for example, the InfraGard capacity, where we're identifying certain sectors and how we're able to manage those relationships and those partnerships, trying to identify, okay, what information do we need to share better, and what information can we share, given all the restrictions that we previously discussed as to whether or not we can share that information because it may come from another agency, and whether or not we can share information that may even come from other countries, and trying to work through those problems as well. But I think that by having those partnerships set up to begin with is key, because I think before it was sort of all over the place, and who essentially wanted to be part of the, for example, InfraGard network, that then seemed to carry more weight than a who should be receiving that information. And so I think we've come a long way when it comes to identifying which sectors that we want to be in that sharing environment. But we still have, obviously, a lot of things, a lot of progress to be made in order to not only actively listen to those sectors, but also what's the best way to get that information back to them in real time, because otherwise it's useless to them if it's too much after the fact. But like I said, there's a lot of challenges associated with that and how we share that information. Sorry, I can answer your question better. Okay, all right, I'm out of time. Thank you again very much. I think we're going to do a chat next, so I guess I'm still here.
You're still on.
I'm still here.
All right.
So, all right.
Thank you. Thank you very much.